I stopped making wedding cakes over 6 years ago, but this particular wedding cake brought me out of retirement and it came with a few challenges. Let me show you how I made it and why I decided to come out of retirement. My best friend got married this weekend and I made her wedding cake. The prep starts way in advance. I mean, I started a good week in advance of the wedding where I made the buttercream and I allowed that to sit in my fridge and chill. And then I started on my cake sponges a couple of days before I was going to assemble the cakes. You know, making this cake just reminded me why I stopped making wedding cakes. And whilst I used to enjoy them back in the day, there was a lot of stress that came from trying to create the perfect wedding cake. It's this requirement of things to be flawless and picture perfect. And then on top of it, you know, the client's requirements can be quite overwhelming at times. And I realised that I just didn't want that level of stress in my life. And whilst my best friend really gave me creative reign on this cake, she just told me what flavours she wants. Everything else was really down to me. It was still stressful because I wanted to make it perfect. And I realised that that's not what baking and cooking is about. It's not about perfection because ultimately none of us are perfect. We cannot achieve perfection. Perfection is for the creator alone. And as much as we try, it's not something that we're ever going to be able to achieve. So we try our best. And in Islam, we have the concept of ihsan, of excellence, of doing things to the best of your ability and not trying to achieve perfection, but just doing them with the utmost love, care, and consideration for the sake of Allah, especially when it comes to cooking. Because food doesn't just affect us on a physical level, it affects us spiritually, emotionally, and mentally too. During the whole process of baking, I was just reciting Allah's name. I was reading salawat over the cakes. I was listening to Surah Baqarah and really just praying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala allows good energy to enter the food that I'm making for other people. And I really think that makes a huge difference. Often we get hung up on the aesthetics of how things look and not how is it affecting people that are going to be eating it. And I've really had to learn to take a step back from, okay, it doesn't need to be or look perfect, but the purpose of which I'm making something needs to be really intentional and ultimately linked to the sake of Allah and for the pleasure of Allah. You see, this is one of the reasons I share my recipes. So all the cakes that I'm making, I've made my lemon sponge. I've also made my vanilla sponge as part of my Victoria sponge recipe. I love to share these recipes with you guys because I want you guys to also gain pleasure from making this for your families, for other people, and also gain pleasure from enjoying them and eating them as well. I mean, just look at how fluffy this sponge is. It's literally like eating a cloud. Look how fluffy it is. Why would anybody not enjoy that? A little disclaimer, this was not part of the wedding cake. This was extra cake for myself. The day before the wedding, I stacked my cake. So this is the largest tier. This is 4 layers and it's 4 layers of lemon sponge with vanilla buttercream and a lemon curd in the centre. I've done my crumb coat. That's gone in the fridge. And then my smaller tier, which is 8-inch, again, 4 layers. This is filled with raspberry jam. So it's my Victoria sponge without chantilly cream, with buttercream, crumb coated. And then I did the outside coat on this one before popping it in the fridge. Oh, I also decorated it with sugar pearls, which I knew in hindsight was going to be a bad idea because there's always finishing touches that you want to make to your cakes once you've stacked them. I don't know why I decided to do this. I was getting ahead of myself. And I'm telling you, these cakes tested my patience. I've not made wedding cakes in so long that I was so out of practice and I forgot how long it takes to smooth everything out, to make everything look amazing and perfect and wonderful. And it just wasn't happening for me. So I gave up. I thought, you know what? I tried to remove the tier from the board that it was on, the smaller tier, and then I ended up cracking the icing, the buttercream came off. So I had to remove all of the sugar pearls to smooth out the icing, which wasn't working. So then I decided to do a ruffle effect to hide my imperfections, because this is how the reality is of making cakes. The next day, I dowelled my cake and stacked both cakes. This was pretty straightforward. I remembered how to do all of this. I had some dowels left over from when I used to bake wedding cakes and do tiered cakes. And this was pretty straightforward, to be honest. I wasn't as nervous about doing this. The next day, I learned a little lesson. I thought, I'm not going to crack the cake. But lo and behold, as I separated them, the cake cracked anyway. And the buttercream came off. And I thought, it's happening again. So I was really, really struggling with it. But I also realised that, again, I need to stop trying to achieve perfection. I'm 6 years out of practice. I haven't made a stacked or tiered cake in so long. And I don't have all the tools, and my even my turntable wasn't level. It was wonky. You can see it as I'm turning it here. It was stressful, to say the least. And then I thought, what can I do to hide my imperfections? I decided to buy borders around the tiers to hide all my imperfections. And this is the reality of baking. Sometimes you're not going to get it right. But the thing is, if you get creative control, all bakers will tell you, we do things to cover up our mistakes sometimes. And people are none the wiser. Nobody would know that all of these things went wrong unless I told them. A big shout out to Acrolux for these cake toppers and charms with support sticks. Oh my gosh, since the last time I baked, it was been so much easier to apply these charms to the cake, because back in the day when I was baking wedding cakes, we didn't have support sticks with your charms and things. And then I remembered how I used to insert flowers and flower arrangements onto wedding cakes. And my local florist, Flowers by Jade, came through for me again, who used to be my go-to supplier for wedding cake flowers. And I got the most beautiful flower arrangements from them, and the cake was ready. And it was full of imperfections, but nobody cared. Everybody was concerned about eating the cake and enjoying the cake. And it reminded me that I need to be more intentional about the way that I bake and I cook, rather than trying to achieve perfection, because the day was perfect regardless.
3, 2, 1.
It looks so good. The cake that took me 3 days to make took about 3 hours to consume at the bride's parents' house after the wedding. Anyway, stay tuned and I'll show you how I made the wedding favours next.